All right, the countdown is done. Welcome to episode 10 of the Kenny and Renny Show. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. This is Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet. And Ken, episode 10, that time has absolutely flown. How are you feeling today? How are you feeling about episode 10?
Excellent, Sean. Great to see you. Good morning. And yeah, what a fun journey we've been having and only getting started here. It should be a fun weekend ahead. And the stretch drive is upon us, which is always a fun time of year.
Yeah, fun weekend ahead and a fun show that we have for you ahead. We got Gene Principe who's going to join us. Old-time Winnipegger, an official Winnipegger. He married into the Winnipeg clan, so he belongs to us for life. Whether he likes it or not, he's with us. And we've got Kevin Weeks joining us from the NHL Network as well. Super excited to talk with both these guys. But Ken, I had a surprise for you, and I wanted to unveil this. Hey, starting a show with surprises, that's as good as it gets. But we've had, a really great interaction with our audience and a response from our audience and for certain things. And I know that when we were having the fun with the headband and stuff like that, people were saying we need to get, merch out, headbands, T-shirts and stuff like that with our symbol. So we've had some requests here or there come in for our symbol that you see in the top right corner of your video there. And it was designed by one of our fans, Richard Medeiros, who designed that and sent it to us, which we were just ecstatic with, Ken, just the fact that someone would go out of their way to do that and be invested enough in the show that they wanted to do that. Had some other people reach out and ask for the symbol, and I wasn't really certain why. And I know one viewer had said, just send it my way, just trust me. And this is what I got dropped off yesterday. I sent you a picture, but this is what he sent our way: a giant Kenny and Renny symbol, and I've got one for you as well. So just so cool, and I'm gonna take these off, Ken, because I've got it all ready to go. I'm gonna hang it up. This has now become part of the home studio, the home office. So if you're not watching at home, but if you're listening on the podcast, I'm going to hang this symbol up on the wall and have it become part of the background here. So just give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, just absolutely awesome. You got to love what you see. It looks like the first album for the Kenny and Renny Show.
There we go.
Sean is putting me to shame with the home office. But I'm going to do my best. Sean's put me to shame with the home office. Tough to beat the Hockey Night in Canada Blazer, and now you've got our first album here. Some of the younger folks will be wondering what an album is, but it looks like it looks like our first record. Look it up on the old interwebs here.
It's like the gold record on the wall. Now, I know I've got a little bit of a large head going on there, and I don't mean ego-wise. I mean physically. I always refer to my head to my family jokingly as the shoebox head because it's like a big, giant shoebox. It's really kind of thin this way, but tall this way and wide that way. And so our symbol is going to be seen every once in a while when I pop back this way or whatever. But hey, thank you so much. I want to give Pat Kanuga a shout out because he headed out and had that done. I didn't ask him to do it. He did it of his own volition. A guy who I've talked about on this show in the past, who was integral in my career. And honestly, Ken, I'd be on a roof somewhere still roofing it if it wasn't for Pat Kanuga, who brought me back into the industry at one point. So man, oh man, that means a ton to me. Thank you for that, Pat. We should get into just a quick conversation, Ken, before we bring Gene Principe in here about, we don't like to date these shows, so we like to talk about themes that are going to live for a little bit. And I guess an interesting one here that fits for the now and is going to fit for the couple of weeks here leading into the playoffs is the idea of teams that have raised their game and are putting themselves in a position to succeed in the playoffs. I think at this very moment, and that could change at any moment, but the Winnipeg Jets are not one of those teams who have done that. They do not look ready for the stretch drive. They do not look ready for the playoffs. Good thing for them, there's still time, and I guess really about 10% of the season left for them to get that figured out. But when you look around the league, look around the division, who are the teams that you think have done the ramp up properly and are right now in a position to go into the playoffs and succeed?
Yeah, this started out with Connor Hellebuck's comments after the Leafs series that the Leafs have found their playoff level and that the Jets had to find theirs, and he's right. I mean, I think the Edmonton Oilers rolled into town and made it pretty clear that they're ready for the playoffs as well. I understand the fan base has the classic reaction to an Oilers loss to the Flames and said, well, if the Flames, a non-playoff team, can do that, how come the Jets couldn't? But, back-to-backs, all those sorts of things. And we've talked about the exhale process throughout the course of this year as well, and the Oilers appear to have been hit by that on Thursday night. Around the league, I think the Colorado Avalanche are dipping a little bit here. They had some goaltending woes. But again, there's not panic in Colorado after 4 losses in a row. They're thinking, guess what? You don't want to peak too soon, right? I mean, the messaging is classic all around the league. We know the Vegas Golden Knights are on absolute fire, 10 wins in a row and counting. And then you have the St. Louis Blues, a team, Sean, that you and I a week or two ago were wondering how they were below the playoff line. Suddenly they've won 4 in a row. Ryan O'Reilly's rolling, and they look like a team that could make things very interesting in their division. And we also know that other great race with the Tampa Bay Lightning, Florida Panthers, and Carolina Hurricanes has been absolutely dynamite there as well. The Lightning starting to get rolling, but man, oh man, there's going to be a really good team that could win the Stanley Cup that, never mind out in the second round, they're going to be out in the first round, one of those 3 teams. So I think it's going to be a fascinating playoff around the corner. In terms of the Jets, yes, for sure they have to crank their level up. What I would say, Sean, their defensive template was on display on Wednesday night, especially at 5-on-5. But suddenly the offensive well has run a little bit dry. Only 6 goals in that 5-game skid, and that's a concern for sure, but we also know that the Jets' larger concern is how they defend and play without the puck, and in terms of their risk profile has been on the rise of late, but they sort of sorted that out on Wednesday. Be interesting to see how they respond on this road trip in terms of generating offense without cheating for offense.
Kenny, I want to get through this really quickly because we've got Gino Principe waiting in the green room, and he's a little bit of a diva. We had to give him the green M&Ms. We had to take out all the other M&Ms for him and everything like that. But I guess just the idea of going into the playoffs hot like that. I look a couple years ago at that St. Louis Blues team that was terrible for the first part of the season, then turned it on. And how much credence is there to the idea of that team, ramping up and being ready at the right time? Or do you think that there's still, if you're the Jets, I guess the quick question I'm asking is there enough time left at this stage to get to where they need to get to be a danger in the playoffs?
Yeah, I certainly understand the premise. And yes, of course, the only time the Jets have gone on a long run in 2018, they were outstanding down the stretch run. So again, is that an optimal level? For sure. But we've also seen teams, Sean, that have been great down the stretch and suddenly hit a roadblock in the playoffs, and we're like, what's happening? That Tampa Bay Lightning team that we talked about from a couple of years ago, record-setting team, they look like there would be no one that could beat them down the stretch, and they didn't win a single playoff game. So it's not a guarantee, but of course teams know that you can't just flip a switch and say, it's unlikely you can be terrible down the stretch and suddenly crank it up. But we've seen a bunch of 8 seeds go deep and right to the Stanley Cup final. I think even one of the years the LA Kings were last team in and won the cup. So the Jets shouldn't be in that situation unless things really stumble down the stretch, but they definitely need to play better. Let's put it that way.
Okay, well, let's get into our Sportsnet reporter in Edmonton, who we very likely looks like we're going to be spending some time on the other side of the aisle in the playoffs with the likelihood of the Oilers and the Jets meeting in the first round. Want to bring in our great friend, Gene Principe, a guy we absolutely love and a guy that we know that our audience absolutely loves from his time in Winnipeg on Sportsline and at CKND. And Gino, I want to start with a story. When I first started on this job, you were so great to me right off the bat. And I remember one time I was at one of my daughter's soccer games, and you had been on Twitter and you'd made a pun, and it wasn't directed at me or anything like that, but a pun popped into my head, and then I responded to you with a pun online, and 5 seconds later, click, you had responded with another pun, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've inadvertently started a pun war with Gene Principe, and then I had to kind of keep going and throw one back at you, and it was like trying to throw water into the wind. You know what I mean? Everything I threw your way, it just kept coming back. And I want to know, for a guy who is the king of punditry, and yes, I know that's not what that word means, but I'm going to use it anyways. Have you ever been to the point that you have had a pun that even makes you groan? I guess a better question is, what's the best pun that you've come up with all the time? Is there some that stand out for you?
You know what? First of all, guys, thanks for having me on the show. Everywhere I go on social media, I see you guys, I hear about you guys, I watch your program. So people are loving the show. So congratulations on that. I think the best one personally for me, and I don't know if I could use it now, but I don't know if you remember a few years ago when Dustin Penner, he hurt his back. And his wife had made pancakes, and he said he kind of stretched out to get pancakes, and he hurt his back. And I remember talking about that and doing a story on that, and then at the end of it saying he hasn't been able to respond, and he's craped the bed. So that's probably my all-time personal favorite. But I think Dustin's been out of the league a little bit, and a Manitoba guy. I'm not sure I could say that these days, or it might be my last game, but that's one that sort of that kind of sticks out. Anyways, there's so many of them, so many bad ones, and in fact, I would say to you guys that the more groans you get, there should be like a groan meter. The higher the groans, the better the pun. But I just started it like it's funny for young viewers. Oftentimes they'll see Ron McLean on Saturday night and say, "Oh, Ron is taking him like Gene. He's doing puns." And I'm like, no. Hang on a sec here. Ron on Coach's Corner, as you guys know, was legendary, and he still has great puns. So, anyways, imitation is the finest form of flattery. So that's the way I look at the road I've taken, good, bad, or indifferent. That's what I do.
Hold on, Ken. Is that where it comes from, Gene? Like, I've always wondered where that came from, because I know that I grew up and my dad was a high school teacher, and we used to carpool. I'd hop in with him to head to school, and he had another teacher, Rudy Clausen, his name was. He was the English teacher, and they would get together, and something about them getting together brought this out in them, and they'd sit there and they'd throw puns at each other the entire trip. And I'd sit in the background, teenage me, and just roll my eyes and be like, why am I being subjected to this? But I mean, I could have gone down that road. And it's the reason why every once in a while, when you'll throw out a pun, something will pop into my head because of that interaction that they had. Is this something that happened in your family? Did your dad or mom do it? Or is this something that, like you said, is Ron kind of an influence in this? Where does the puns come from?
Yeah, well, I think nowadays, guys, there's puns. First of all, I always say anyone can do it. I just choose to do it. The other thing, too, is I think people are starting to look at puns like, we call them dad jokes now. It's almost like it's become like a dad joke. But I would say for sure, listen, I remember starting out my career and working at Grand Prairie and Lethbridge, and watching Hockey Night in Canada, watching Ron, and Ron with his words. There's nobody like him. Pick a sport, any country, and I would put Ron up against anyone. And so it's something that I watched and I admired, and kind of started to do it a little bit. And I got the sense at that point social media was becoming bigger, and kind of got some traction out of it. And then the Oilers, they went through a real difficult time for a long time, and I found myself, deep down, I'm from Edmonton and an Oilers fan, and I just thought, man, we gotta try and lighten this up. People know that they're struggling. People know they've lost this amount of games. People know their power play percentage. As Winnipeg Jets fans, I'm sure we'll tell you guys exactly what's going on with the team. So I thought, how can we try and make this a little bit lighter, a little more entertaining? And so it just kind of started, I would say, 15 or so years ago. And our bosses at Sportsnet are great. Sometimes they have to kind of pull the reins back a little bit and say, hey, easy, buddy. Like it's a 2-punt maximum, like relax. So which is fine. I get that. So, yeah, a combination of Ron, certainly a guy that I look at as a mentor and someone who's an incredible broadcaster, and then taking it my own direction. And I think one of the other things too, guys, is that with the amount of games that we broadcast now, it used to be kind of like Hockey Night in Canada. You'd get 1, maybe 2 games a week. Well, now we're doing sometimes 3 or 4 games a week. So there's definitely a bigger avenue to use the games because the airtime that you get. So that's kind of how it started, and that's how it continues. And just trying to have fun with it. My kids are always like, Dad, But yeah, I find it really enjoyable for me, and I hope more fans than less fans also find it enjoyable.
Speaking of where things got started, Gene, where does your passion for both journalism and broadcasting come from?
Well, it's a great question. For me, I was, I always wanted to be a pro soccer player, and I envisioned myself one day playing for the Italian national team, which seemed like, unlikely for a kid out of Edmonton. Well, I was trying out for the under 16 Alberta provincial soccer team, and back then when I was playing, we didn't have the indoor soccer facilities. For us, that was a gym. That's where you played. That was quote unquote indoor soccer. And I tried out, and I wasn't the first cut, but I also wasn't the last cut. And it really struck me. I was like, it was kind of the first setback I'd ever had in soccer, and I was like, okay, well, I gotta, what can I do? Because I'm not sure this is going to work out. And I love sports, and I love sports announcers. Watching them, Al Michaels, Dick Enberg, Howard Cosell, from a sort of North American or international stage, and then I watched guys locally, and I thought, well, geez, if I can't play sports professionally, maybe I could cover sports professionally. So that was, I was about 14, 15 years old, and then I just I decided through high school that my focus would be going to post-secondary college. I always joke with my kids that I did apply to university, I did get accepted, but they didn't really have a journalism program at that time. So I went to college here in Edmonton, NAIT, Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, back in the mid 1980s, and then just kind of went from there. As just a young dumb kid who really didn't know where he was going to end up or how he would get there, but I was open to traveling, working in small cities and towns, and basically trying anything to climb the ladder.
You're talking about soccer, Gino, jogs my memory. A couple of years ago, my brother-in-law and my sister and I took my nephew to his first ever concert, and we wanted it to be a cool concert, so we took them to Iron Maiden, and it was awesome. It was I'd seen them before, but they were absolutely awesome. And then I noticed a couple of days later when they went to Edmonton, a band that loves soccer, they got together with a bunch of people in Edmonton and played soccer, and I noticed you were out on the field with them. So one, how are those guys as soccer players? But two, how'd you get involved in that, and what was that experience like?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, you know what? They were really good. Like I got to admit, I'm not. I recognize Iron Maiden. I certainly understand or recognize the name, but I really didn't know who would have made up Iron Maiden. But they were really good soccer players, and not just the band members, but of course, as you guys know, they got roadies, they got their crew that they travel with, and they were excellent. And so someone had given me a call. I was actually busy that night. A member of the local Edmonton soccer team called me and said, "Listen, we got this game set up, a friendly," and I said, "Well, I don't know." And then I told my wife, she's like a headbanger from Winnipeg, and she's like, "Well, you got to go. It's Iron Maiden." So I went, and I think, guys, and you guys get it too. People will ask you often, like, what's the best part of your job, and what's the coolest part of your job? And there's so many cool parts. We get to cover sports for a living. We get to sit in arenas all over either the world or North America or Canada. And we get to meet a lot of great people and a lot of great experiences. And I think that was an example of something that it would have been unlikely for me to have that kind of avenue if I wasn't involved in what I do. So it was a great night, and listen, I always envisioned myself playing soccer, and for me to be out on a pitch, when I drive by a soccer field, especially when you get into spring and summer, for me, it's like my happy place. I just feel so calm and yet passionate about what happens there. I played hockey as a kid, and I wasn't, very good. Couldn't skate would have been, I guess, the label. I just wasn't a very good skater, no matter how hard I tried at it. So I love playing sports, and it just lucky for me, I was able to get into it and still into it by covering it.
Bruce Dickinson on the pitch. That's a great story, Gino. Love that a lot. The closest I got to one of those moments, I skate with some musicians here in Winnipeg, and there was going to be one of those pickup games with Gord Downey, but it ended up not happening. That would have been a pretty cool story there. How about your involvement in the Winnipeg Soccer Committee? I've had a few people reach out on Twitter saying, "Oh, I know Gino from back then." What kind of memories stand out from that time?
Oh, it was great. In fact, just to name drop Ty Domi back in 94, 95 during the lockout, a lot of the players were in Winnipeg, and Ty used to round up some media, the Scooch, Joe Pascucci, and I, and some others would go play some indoor soccer. In fact, the Nichita family, Tony Nichita, who was a longtime member of the soccer community there, was involved in building some of those indoor bubbles or indoor soccer facilities. Winnipeg was great. Listen, I met my wife there, Grapes Pier 7, which is no longer there. And we used to go to, I think Manitoba might be the only province that has the socials for weddings. And I met her once, and she kind of said, no chance. And then I saw her again, and my cousin Tina and Dan were getting married, and I saw her at the social. But Winnipeg, for me, it's really got a soft spot. I love the city. It's really where my career took off. I was working in Lethbridge and moved to Winnipeg, and it was the first chance to cover an NHL team, a CFL team, and then it helped me, move on from there. I've got my wife's family all there, and the soccer community was great. In fact, I don't have a lot of regrets in life. I think as you get older, you want to have as few regrets as possible. And the only one that I have with sports was that I wanted to be a national referee. And Winnipeg is where I got started. I had just begun in Lethbridge, moved to Winnipeg, and there were so many people in Winnipeg that just were really in your corner and fighting for you and helping you and refereeing. You went kind of from level 3, level 2, level 1, nominated national, and then into a national referee program. So through the Winnipeg era, I got up to the national referee program, and then actually I moved to Toronto. They were supportive, and I wrote it. I was 35, and I wrote my national program test. You needed 85 to pass. I never got 85s in anything. I got an 80, which I was happy with, but I couldn't get an 85, and so I had to wait 2 more years to write the test. And at that point, we were having a family. I was working with the Oilers. I missed some soccer assignments because I was traveling. And the soccer thing just kind of ended up, unfortunately, it was up here. And then it just started to fall refereeing-wise because I just didn't have the time. But Winnipeg was great. I love the soccer community. And I love the Bloomberg Fields there. When you drive into town, there would be soccer games happening. I do remember this when I first moved to Winnipeg, summer of 92. It was either raining or it was mosquito season. I remember as a referee, you're just slapping them all over the place. But then over time, I got used to it. But Winnipeg's a great city. I mean, it's honestly, I think it's a wonderful city. Friendly Manitoba's not. It's there for a reason, and it's a big part of who I am and what I've been able to do as a broadcaster.
Gino, you mentioned your wife being a metalhead from Winnipeg. And
yeah,
I could not have more respect for her after hearing that. Since we're talking music, I understand that you were a DJ early in life.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing you weren't spinning Iron Maiden tracks.
Oh.
So give me an idea of what an early DJ spinning session with Gene Principe would have looked like and the kind of jams you would have been busting out.
Well, ABBA. Eddie Murphy, Party All the Time. We definitely had some Journey back then. I was like, would you call it definitely pop, like soft pop, like I liked Caribbean Queen, Billy Ocean. Those are definitely what I used to do. A buddy of mine, two Italian guys, had a DJ service, and they had 2 or 3 sets of equipment, so that when they had more than one gig on a Saturday or Friday night, they would kind of subcontract myself and my cousin Vince, and I loved it. I mean, I was never. I love music, like different varieties. I'm not a huge concert goer like my wife loves U2, just because I just wasn't into going to a 2 or 2.5 hour concert per se. But I love music. And listen, it wasn't a bad way to meet girls when you're 19 or 20, right? DJs are always cool, even if they're not cool. So it was great. It's one of those things that's interesting you bring it up because, of course, your kids, they just think you're old, right? They don't really think that you actually were their age at one time. Dad, you were a DJ? It's like it gives you a little, a little cool impact with them. But it was a lot of fun back in kind of my late teens, early 20s DJing. And I guess another opportunity to be in front of a microphone, do talking to people between, songs. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun back then and some great memories.
You talked about the puns. Someone in our chat room mentioned the Conehead. Where did
Yeah.
that come from? What was the impetus behind that?
Yeah, you know what? David Cone, who was a real great pitcher, pitched for the Yankees and the Jays, among other teams. And this is Joe Pascucci, who no longer lives in Winnipeg, but I'm sure most people who are tuning into your show would recognize or remember the Scooch. He really, we all need breaks in our careers. We all need people in our corner to support us. And I was working in Lethbridge and had the opportunity to move to Winnipeg. And Joe, for me, he had such a great eye for talent, not where they are, but where they're going and where they're going to end up. And, Darren Millard's another example of a guy who's had a great career. And Joe spotted him and said, you know what, this kid's got talent and I think we can work with him. And so Joe was a real big help in pushing me along. And we used to set up the show and Joe would leave 4 minutes of, people fooling around time, just 4 minutes throughout the show that would be lost during the half hour for just fooling around for whatever came up. And so I ended up, I don't know how I had the cone head. And I said to Joe, I go, Joe, would you mind if I wear the cone? He's like, go ahead, wear the cone head, And again, you're talking, I was in Winnipeg from 92 to 95. And I still, I still love it. I'll get, not like tons of people, but I'll still get people who say, I remember you when you were in Winnipeg, great people who have great memories of what we do, is really important in some cities, and Winnipeg is one of them because you become a part of their morning, their afternoon, their evening, their post game, their pre-game, and with what you guys are doing now, you really get access into people's lives, right? It's pretty simple whether you do it an Instagram live or you click on a Zoom link and there you are. So yeah, that was part of it. I remember wearing that cone head, and in fact, I used that when we used to put together resume tapes. Back a long time ago. The kids still do it, but it's just a link. And now, we used to send them out to all these people looking for jobs. And that was one of the first pieces of video that I would put. I thought, you know what, if that's what I want to do at my next job, I want to make sure people know that's what I'm doing now. I don't want to get a job where they said, well, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. So yeah, it was a big part of, helping me move on from Winnipeg to Toronto and, just kind of continue to have some moderate success anyways in broadcast.
You're being humble. I remember your time there growing up in high school and through the 90s. My buddies and I were really, really into sports. And I remember, you're a teenager and you're very social, but I remember you'd be talking with your buddies on the phone, and then you'd stop what you were doing and turn the TV on because Sportsline was coming on. It was that important a program, and you'd sit and you'd talk about what you were seeing and what was happening. And I just love thinking back on that and the angle of like the local sports side of it. And I think, even for me, I'm not a spring chicken, and I never went through the sports room. I did work at CKND for a bit. It wasn't called that then. It was clearly Global. So I had the access to Joe Pascucci, but I never worked because the sports newsrooms were shrinking at that time. Yeah. They've still shrunk since. So, I went through news and transitioned out of it into sports. And then you've got, some of our younger colleagues like Kyle Bukauskas and Sean McKenzie. They went right out of school into those positions, which was an absolute dream, unheard of in my time. I'm sure wasn't even a consideration in your time. But I wonder about this because I think back and I have so much admiration and respect for the stuff that you guys did on that show, and kind of like you're saying, the time to play that Joe gave you guys. And I wonder for you, a person who leveraged and used the local sports newsroom to the maximum in a time where you were still allowed to do that, to see the local sports newsrooms shrinking and disappearing. I don't think there's a better person to ask than you about what we're losing when we've lost that and the ability for people to grow in those spaces. What's your take on the direction the industry is going in there and what is being lost with the local newsroom, local sports newsroom? Yeah,
you know what, Sean, I couldn't agree with you more. There were so many great opportunities. And listen, don't get me wrong. It's a pleasure and a privilege, to cover Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and be around the National Hockey League or the CFL and been able to cover World Series and, gone not all over the world, to different parts of the world, though, through Olympics. And so, listen, it's been great. But, there is a part of me that really misses those local stories of Johnny or Kim or Terry, who's playing for the might be team and has X amount of goals in a certain amount of games. Listen, at the end of the day, nobody loves a human interest story more than humans. And we are so connected to seeing, young people in sports, in the case of what we do, succeed or have a great season, or tell a story of a young boy who fell and hurt himself and has come back and recovered. And so for me, I honestly, you mentioned Sean McKenzie, Cal Bukowskis, and I'm thinking, I wasn't a tenth as good as those guys at that age. I mean, these guys are working on Hockey Night in Canada, and it looks like they've been doing it for 30 years, and they're not even 30 years old, So I couldn't imagine doing that at their age. And so I needed those local newsrooms and those opportunities to sort of work on my game. And it's really disappointing. Winnipeg's an incredible sports town. Edmonton's a great sports town, and yet you have 6 o'clock news broadcasts without sports in it, without a true sports team, which to me is unfathomable. But I guess that's what they're hearing. That's what they're being told. That's what the ratings are suggesting. I mean, I can't see Winnipeg being in the playoffs, Edmonton being in the playoffs in the first, second, third round Stanley Cup final, and not having a local sports team and having a 5 or 6 or 7 minute sports segment to talk about the team. So I never thought it would ever get to this. I mean, certainly with the advent of, I love what Sportsnet has done, and I think it serves a huge community, not only nationwide, but with our regional broadcast. But yeah, it's amazing to me that the local broadcasts just don't have the fire. Really, that's what you tried to do when you were my age. There was no regional opportunities, or certainly national back then. You were happy if you made it to the 6 o'clock news and you were doing the sports or anchoring the news or reporting on the news. But yeah, it's changed a lot. It's part of the ever-changing world we live in, and one that isn't always for the best.
So interesting, Gene. I mean, I love the fact that I got to cover the Manitoba Moose for 10, 11 seasons here, 1 year in the IHL, 10 years in the American League. But you're right, in terms of the reps, I mean, how much has your job changed? I mean, for me, I think those days, I had some great learning experiences, dealing with the Randy Carlisle. And I mean, we were fortunate at the Sun. They treated it like an NHL beat. We were traveling full time. But again, now every question you ask is online almost immediately. There's no real room for a misstep, or that guy's an idiot, how could you ask that question? I mean, how has that part of the job changed, just the way the microscope is on not only the teams but the media, where every question is basically shown live now?
Yeah, I agree. And now with the Zooms, it's even a kind of a step further, because we take these Zoom calls live, and so people hear your questions, and people after the game will not only comment on the player comments, but they'll comment on the questions by the reporters. I started to see that change over the last few years, where some of the different teams and some of the different sports would take the post game live, and they'd walk into a room, and you're asking your own question, and they've got their microphone in front of you and then over to the player. So yeah, that's been incredible how things have changed. I think the one thing though, social media to me is, listen, we used to do our job, and I guess our friends, our family, maybe our wives, you get a little bit of feedback, but really the feedback that mattered the most was from your bosses. You'd have 1 or 2 or 3 or however many bosses that you would deal with on a semi-regular or regular basis. But now, with social media, how many bosses do you have out there? Because everybody seems to know what you should be doing, or how you should be asking this, or how you handled this, or what you did here, or why you did this. And so I think that's the thing that's changed the most, is that, you can do an opening, you can do an interview, you can do a story. And then if you do hop online right away, you've got a roll of comments saying that was great or that wasn't great. How could you ask that? Why did you say that? How did you do that? couldn't you have handled it this way? So I think we're kind of used to it, and now that's just how things go. But that's the one area I think that's changed immensely, in that people, they always maybe had their opinions of the media, but they didn't have an avenue to express those opinions, and now they do. And unless you just totally stay off social media, which is a big part of our job, you're always going to find out what people think about you pretty quickly.
Gino, another big part of our job is, finding out little tidbits of information about players. And I remember I was in the Jets room and I was talking with Brian Little a couple of years back. And he told me at one point, he said, I'm afraid of flying. And that kind of blew me away, because I thought, here's, a guy who gets in an industry where he's got to hop on a plane all the time. And he would still, when he could, avoid it, in the off season when he didn't have to. My sources tell me you've got a fear of flying, and you're kind of in the same situation where you're following the Oilers wherever you go. So you're hopping on a plane. It's entirely part of your job. I'm interested in how you reconcile that, having a job that, so few people are required to travel as much as you are. How do you reconcile that? And maybe tell me a story. I think it's a flight from Toronto to Windsor, I was told to ask about. That was an absolute nightmare for you.
Yeah. You know what? That's, listen, one of the things, first of all, I do have a fear of flying, and I know people are like, well, how and why would you get into this industry? I would say I didn't, when I didn't fly very much, I didn't really have a fear for it. But I would say in the last, 20, 25 years that I've flown more and more and more, the more I've done it, I think the more fearful I've become of it. I think it's twofold. There's the fear factor. And then I just, I've never been a guy who could ride a roller coaster because I would just not feel well. I'd get sick, sort of like, my stomach. So when you get that really bad turbulence, there's the fear factor, and then there's I'm not feeling good factor. So it's a combination. I remember that we were going to cover Detroit, Colorado series, and it would have been like 2001 or two. I had just started, and or three, and Colorado Detroit was famous, those series that they had between the two franchises. And I one thing I always do if I'm not flying with the Oilers, I really try and check out the size of the plane. I try and there's something for me that some people say no, smaller, smoother flights, but I like the bigger planes. But if you're flying Toronto to Windsor, it's that 45, 50 seater. That's your only choice. And it was like a lightning storm. And oh man, I just was so fearful. Not to sound, not even weak is the right word, but just to think that plane's not going to make it, right? And that means you're not going to make it. And, I don't want to get too depressing for people, but, at times that's when it's a really bad ride. That's what I think. Some people are kind of like, okay, it's bad, we'll get through it. It's just, that's the way I think, right? So, that was a terrible one. And my cameraman, Corey Blashill, who I think probably told you the story, he's an excellent flyer. He's an excellent flyer. And that's one of the things I would be amazed at is I would watch other people around me, and they're just kind of, maybe they're a bit nervous, but they're cool. I call it the clutch and grab. I grab the seat in front of me hard, and then I grab the armrest beside me, and I just clamp on, and I don't move, and I look, I pick a spot, and I just stare at it. And I don't want anyone to talk to me. It doesn't help me when people talk. Sometimes people have tried that, but I just clutch, grab, stare, and that's it. And I just count, thinking, okay, soon, that's been 1 minute, So, but, sometimes you have smooth flights. It's no problem, or a little bit of turbulence. But yeah, it's just something I'm fearful of. And, I got to say, guys, I've been home, like basically all of us, since last March. So it's been 13, 14 months, and I miss being in New York. I miss being in Florida. I miss being in those places, but I don't miss being how you get there. So I'm curious to see if things return to normal and we start flying like you guys do, how exactly I'll be with getting back on a plane.
Gene, one quick one here on Connor McDavid. This quest for 100 is just been absolutely ridiculous to watch firsthand. But what stood out to you about how this guy continues to find a different level when you think he's already at the top player in the league kind of level. And again, maybe that's the part that maybe we miss about the traveling part. When this would be a traveling road show basically in a normal season, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I, I miss that because, there's no media coming into town, or when you go to Winnipeg or Toronto and you have all this media that want to speak to Connor McDavid. I'm amazed at the kid. Listen, it's you got some great talent in Winnipeg, and I think part of the privilege of our job is sitting in the stands, is sitting in the press box and getting a chance to watch, Mark Scheifele or Connor Hellebuck or Kyle Connor, pick your player in Winnipeg and Edmonton. We're certainly happy to have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and others. But Connor is just, he's something. Like I think his competitive fire and spirit is, everybody knows he's got it, but I think it's at a level that we don't even understand. And I think he's such a hard worker. Listen, when you're that good, unfortunately, people don't put hard work at the top of the list of your characteristics. They're talking about your hands, your vision, your sense of the game, your IQ, your skating, of course, first. You talk about so many other things, but I just think he's an incredibly hard worker, and the freaking guy wants to win. He wants to win. They asked him about 100 points the other day. You know what? He kind of sloughs it off. I know he wants to get to 100. Sure, I get that. But, at this point in his career, drafted in 15, we're in 2021. He wants to win. He wants to win in the playoffs. He wants to win a Stanley Cup. That's what all these young guys want to do. And so I think that's part of the reason, Ken and Sean, that you think, okay, he's here. Well, wait a minute. He can go here. He goes here. He goes here. And I don't know when it'll stop, but I'm certainly happy that we get a chance to see it up close and personal.
Gino, my first journalism job at CKND, it was a real surreal feeling to look across the room and see Joe Piscucci there. And 15-year-old me was absolutely ecstatic. Wow. And 15-year-old me feels the same way about, having the opportunity to sit and talk with you now. And like we always have, you've always been so good to me since coming to Sportsnet. I want to thank you for your time. Great stuff here, Gene. And it looks like we'll be, like I said, kind of staring at each other across the aisle when it comes playoff time. It's going to be fun. This North Division is going to be an interesting year to the way it ends up, and looking forward to spending some more time with you going down the stretch here, Gene.
Yeah, that sounds great. Look forward to the first round matchup, and you guys keep up the great work in your full-time jobs as well as what you do here. People are loving it.
Excellent stuff, Gene. Thank you so much. There goes Gene Principe from Sportsnet, and coming straight in, we're going to bring in our second guest, Kevin Weeks from the NHL Network. Kevin, great to see you. Great to finally have you on. We've been dying to talk to you, and we finally get there. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to get you to try and solve a problem we've been trying to figure out. We had Louis DeBrusque on the program at one point, and we were examining the idea that the best analysts seem to be either former tough guys or goalies. Why is that, Kevin? And who are the better analysts, the goalies or the tough guys?
Well, I like that you've narrowed it down to the two right categories. That's the first thing. So we got to start there. I would say, pardon me if I may, I would say goalies, because for goalies, we see a little north of 90% of the game played in front of us. So a little bit more than 90% of the game is played in front of us. So it gives you a full spectrum view of the game, of the way in which the play develops, the different sequences within the game. You have literally a first eye view. So I think if I can kind of enlighten some of the fans on that, for example, a lot of people love video games. I'm not a gamer per se, but for a lot of people that are in the audience, they love to see that first person perspective of that video game they're playing. So if it's a Formula One kind of racing simulation game, or some type of a military simulation game, people tend to love those games. That's what it's like when you're playing goal. So you see the entire game basically in front of you. So you've got to be able to read and react. So that's why I think that goalies make the best analysts in our sport, and quarterbacks often do that in football.
How'd you become a goalie, Kevin? We'll get into the broadcasting side of things at some point here, but how'd you become a goalie, and why'd you stick with it?
Okay, so when my parents first emigrated from Barbados to Canada, and my aunt and uncle left Barbados, Jamaica to London, UK, and then they went to Canada. My older cousin he's born in 68. And when they started playing street hockey in our neighborhood, downtown Toronto, they started playing street hockey. My older cousin him and his friends, 68, 67, some of them 69 in terms of their birth year. I was born in 75. So I would hang around with them when they would play street hockey in our backyard, in our streets and behind our building and in our neighborhood downtown. And essentially there was one goalie named Lambros. So just remember, they always called him Lambros. That was his last name. And he would be in the one net all the time. And then they'd rotate the other goalie. For whatever reason, Lambros and his parents had emigrated from Greece to Canada. And then they left Toronto and then moved back to Greece. It was the weirdest thing. So at that point, there was one net that was vacant. And I was 5, 6 years old, literally. And they were like, okay, if you want to play, then you got to kind of jump in. And I'm like, perfect. That's where I want to be anyway. And we just started playing street hockey. We kind of went from there. And then we went to Hillcrest Park in the winter, just down the street from us. And they used to flood it and make a rink in the winter. And I would literally be out on the rink I don't know for those of you guys that are in around my age, but we used to wear Cougar boots in the winter. I don't know if you remember old school Cougar winter boots. So before I had my first pair of skates, I literally was wearing Cougar boots on this rink. And not everybody had skates at the time. Before our parents bought us our first pair of skates at Canadian Tire and stuff. So from there, I registered to play house league at the world famous St. Mike's Arena in Toronto. And right from then, pardon me, my first book in grade 1, as we say back in Canada, or first grade as we say here in the US. My first book, Miss Mahar was my teacher. And I wrote and then I sketched myself in this book of being a goalie under a scoreboard with the NHL logo on it. And I knew at 6 years old that I wanted to play in the NHL and I want to be an NHL goalie. It was that clear for me.
That's super interesting. Talk about visualization at an early age. We had Harn Ryan Singh on this program, and he kind of explored the theme of hockey kind of bringing his culture in and marrying it with Canadian culture. I wonder, as a new family from Barbados, what your experience was like with hockey and the potential for it to kind of bring you into the fabric of the Canadian culture.
Yeah, it's very similar. You know, anybody for any of us, whether you're from Ireland, Scotland, Russia, Philippines, East Indian, Southeast Asian in general, Caribbean, Italian, Greek, like literally Portuguese. That's kind of the cool part for me, having grown up in Toronto and the parts of Toronto where I grew up, is there was this cultural mosaic, and it was rich, even though it was in Little Italy, in and around St. Clair West at the time. There was this rich cultural fabric. And what was really cool for a lot of us is we just all watched games. We watched hockey on Global at the time, and then we watched Hockey Night in Canada. And we were all playing to some extent, or a lot of us were playing to some extent, at least street hockey. So from that standpoint, it was a very easy way for us to kind of still retain, you know, our cultural identity at home. You know, my Italian buddies, they were still speaking Italian, and their nonas were still, you know, my Polish friends, the whole thing. But for all of us, that was our kind of entry into the country. And I don't want to say in terms of assimilating, but in terms of actually getting ingratiated into the country and playing the natural sport that so many of us grew up to love and play. And it wasn't only for a lot of us, it was also for our parents and siblings and family members. So I was very lucky in that, you know, my dad played cricket back home in Barbados, and my parents were very open-minded. I'm very fortunate that they're open-minded people. Not everybody was open-minded. And to be fair, especially then, even still now, but when you turn on the TV, if you don't see anybody that looks like you, or that has your accent, or that has your last name or your last spelling or the same accents on your last name, it'd be pretty easy for different family members to say, well, I mean, that's why we play soccer, you know, or that's why we play rugby, or that's why we play cricket, or whatever it is. That's totally not why we play hockey. So fortunately at home, I had that open-mindedness from my parents and then my young sister when she was born, to have that support. And that's exactly, to echo Hannah Ryan's point, that's how I got into the game and our family got into it.
Who were some of the goalies that you looked up to?
Oh, man. Are you kidding me? I looked at so many of them. I had every hockey card, every sticker book. I mean, you name it. Like, Grant Fuhr was my guy because Grant Fuhr was Grant Fuhr. And he was the most electrifying goalie to watch. He was so dynamic. He had the best glove hand to this date I've ever seen. He was money. He was clutch. He happened to be black as well, too, which for me showed me that it was possible to make the NHL. And also, whenever any dummy would say something, they'd be like, yeah, well, And that's for people that look like me and people that don't on the color wheel. They'd be like, oh, well, you can't play hockey. I mean, that's a white person's game. Like, what are you talking about? And I'd be like, have you watched Grant Fuhr? Have you watched the Edmonton Oilers? He's the best goalie on the planet. And he was, again, as I said, he was so fun to watch play with that great Oilers team. And he's one of the greats of all time. But him, I loved Kirk McLean. And I'll tell you a quick story about him. We were on a field trip at Consumers Gas. I was probably 13 years old, and he was the man. K-Mac was the man for Vancouver Canucks. He was so smooth and elegant in how he played. His gear, his Vaughn gear looked sweet. And I remember we're in this trip, and I see this Kirk McLean card on this lady's desk. I'm like, oh, my God, that's Kirk McLean. She's like, oh, do you know Kirk? I'm like, no, I don't know him, but I love watching him. She goes, that's my son. Oh. And it was his mom, and she gave me that card. And by the way, I ended up playing with Kirk McLean down the line in the latter stages of his NHL career. So this goes to show you how things come first, full circle. But Mike Richter, Kirk McLean, Eddie Belfour, Dominic Hasek, Patrick Waugh, Felix, especially for me, growing up in Toronto, Felix Potvin was the man. And ironically, I was involved in a trade for him. So it's kind of weird the way it goes. But I loved all goalies, man. I'm a goalie nut, gear nut, equipment aficionado, and I just loved everybody. Unfortunately, I got to play against a lot of my heroes too.
I want to get to that, and it's going to take me a bit to get there because you're talking about being a gear nut, and I know that Kirk McLean influenced you when down the line in your pursuit of fashion. So I want to broach the subject of fashion because in preparing for this interview, I talked to some people that I know who know you through the industry, and someone brought up an old car that you had. I think it was the Audi S8. And he said it's interesting because that car so symbolized Weeksy because it was sleek like a luxury car, but performed like a sports car. And they said that's kind of you, not only on the ice, but your fashion as well. Really elegant, but like kind of mean at the same time. And so I know that you're a fashion guy. It sounds like you used to go to Fashion Week back in the day. And I think back to your time in New York and being on a team with guys like Henrik Lundqvist and Sean Avery, who were noted clothes horse and really into that kind of stuff. One, were you and Henrik Lundqvist the best dressed goaltender duo of all time? And two, when you're in a room with those guys, who had the best eye for fashion out of you in those two?
Oh, man, thank you. Pardon me. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I love that S8, by the way. The old V10 S8 was awesome. That was a fun car and could drive through anything. And still north of 500 horsepower. That was a fun vehicle. I would say we were the best dressed duo for sure, Hank and I for sure. But, listen, what was really cool is because I was raised old school. My parents were always big on how you present yourself and how you conduct yourself and carrying yourself a certain way, right? Because it wasn't, it's no big baggy jeans and sloppy and look out of place and none of this, I don't care how I look and it doesn't matter and that doesn't matter. I'm not here to impress anybody. None of that stupid talk. I would never hear it. My parents always would tell my sister and I, look professional. It doesn't matter if you're casual, look professional, look clean, be presentable, respect yourself, respect our family, respect the people that are around you, and always carry yourself a certain way. So when I've always been that way since I was a kid, like, my parents would have us and I'd be wearing a suit and my sister would be wearing dresses to church when we were young. Like you always, look the part. And my minor hockey coach, bless his soul, who was from Manitoba, the great Keith Armstrong, who passed on now. Mr. Armstrong always had us with the Toronto Red Wings. We were always, since we were 8, like organized, clean, team issue tracksuits, gray slacks, white dress shirt, tie. So I was raised that way naturally, but my hockey environment kind of mirrored that as well. And then, so by the time I got to the NHL and stuff, those things were really natural for me. But as far as Hank, Abe's too, but Hank more specifically, Henrik Lundqvist kind of revolutionized fashion in our league because, coming from Sweden, having more European tailored fitted suits, bespoke suits, very simple, nice patterns, but great tailoring. He was is still such a thin frame that they just fit him perfectly. So it looked like he was walking the runway for Dior or Balmain or any of the other fashion houses, right? He just looked amazing all the time, still does. We just put him last week. And the really cool thing about that is we had so many people that didn't know. And as often happens, as it's usually the people that don't know that are always trying to chirp, So guys would be like, Hank, where you going in that suit? Where you going in that tight suit, Hanky? Where you going to that tight suit? You look like Rod Stewart with that skinny tie. And I swear to God, he was literally 3 to 5 years ahead of the fashion curve here, by the way, in New York. Like that's how far advanced he was in his fashion and his look. So he's a one of a kind person. He's a great guy, man. We're awesome friends. Honored to call him a friend, but he's really on the ice and off the ice. He helped take the style game in the NHL to a whole different level. He helped bring us and goalies as well to a whole different level with his performance, but his look and his feel. He was awesome.
So many places to go, but I just want to stay on Lundqvist for a second. Had a chance to
Sure.
cover him in a couple playoff series. Kevin, I mean, what was it like to, you were his teammate, but now to see what he went through with the heart condition, to see what he's had to endure when just looked like he was going to a great place, this great fit. He's going to chase that cup, and then all of a sudden you have that kind of a medical setback.
Look, let me tell you guys something. I remember, I'll give you a full context. I remember his training camp in 2005 coming out of the lockout. And I remember even prior to that, hearing from buddies that were playing in Sweden during the lockout, because some of us didn't want to play overseas because we feared backlash, right? Then you're going to get blackballed by GMs and the whole thing. So we're like, okay, I'm not going. Some guys went, I didn't go. I just skated at home with my goalie coach, Sudsy Maharaj, who's Anaheim's goalie coach. And we just skated in Toronto together. And I got to tell you, I heard people saying, they're like, wait till you see this guy. This guy's sick. This goalie, Lundqvist, is unbelievable. And he had won the Swedish Elite League, if you remember, prior to coming over with Frölunda. And I remember the first day of training camp, we get on the ice, and I remember calling home because I was slated to be the starter. I just came off of a career year in Carolina, 6 shutouts. I played 66 games, whatever. I had just shy of a .915 save percentage on a team that was nowhere near the playoffs. And I remember calling home and like, this guy's unbelievable. But there's no way. And I didn't even play the whole year prior to, right, with the lockout. Like, there's no way that this guy's not going to be the number one goalie. And I started the season the number one, and I think I played the first 5 games or something to that effect, and got off to a good start. I hurt my groin, and whether I hurt my groin or not, this guy was like a freight train that was just coming in behind me, and he just literally took the position. He grabbed the position by storm. He grabbed that number one role, and he grabbed Madison Square Garden by the throat, and he was like, "I'm the king. I'm here. I'm here to kick." And I got to tell you, man, and it was so fun playing with him. It wasn't as fun losing the number one role, but it was fun in playing with him. And at that point, I said to myself, I'll be the best backup in the league. I got to find a way to contribute. And I just I'll approach every day like a starter, but I'll be the best backup out there. And that was kind of my approach. And I wanted to be the best teammate I could be for him, with him being, a rookie goalie. His work ethic was so off the charts, and he was doing things that we'd never seen. Like, goalies never wanted to practice breakaways. He wanted more. Pre-practice breakaways, post-practice breakaways, pre-game warm-up in the game, pre-game warm-up breakaways. So the way Hank is wired, I got to tell you, I remember he came in after a shootout one game, and we lost to Washington, and he was ticked at Jágr, the great Jaromir Jágr. And Yogs tried to go glove on Oli Kolzig, and he missed the shot. And Hank came in. He was mad, jammed his mask in the locker. I'm like, Hanky, cool out, bro. Like, take it easy. Like, just be chill. Come on, that's Jaromir Jágr. You got to be. He's like, no, F that. No. And he was so – and I'm like, Hank, even Dominic Hasek loses games sometimes, man. Like, just be cool. Well, who eclipsed Dominic Hasek as the winningest all-time European goalie in the NHL history? Henrik Lundqvist. So I could just tell you this, Kenny. And as much as people look at Hank for the hair and the gel and the suits and the Lambos and the Aston Martins and everything else, you don't know Henrik Lundqvist. This guy's a different bird. He is a different bird. He's made $100 million, whatever he made in his career. When we were at dinner, okay, in New York, I don't know, maybe 5-6 weeks ago, we're at dinner. We're at dinner. The next morning, I see this clown post on Instagram, great day to be going to the arena. Can't wait to get back on the ice. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? We were just there. Like, you're 40 days post open heart surgery. We were just at dinner the night before. You didn't tell me you were skating. So he put this on Instagram. I called him. I sizzled him. I'm like, what are you doing skating? He's like, got to get back at it, man. Just want to compete. Just want to feel myself on the ice. So I asked him, I go, where are you skating? So he was skating on a private rink here in Metro New York. The next morning, I show up at the rink with my goalie skates. He's like, I'm one shooter light. I'm like, perfect. I have my goalie skates. I got player gloves and the stick. And I go on the ice with this guy. He looks the exact same. 45 days or whatever it was after open heart surgery. It's incredible. So that's Henrik Lundqvist in a nutshell, where a lot of people don't give him enough credit for not only being a great goalie and a future Hall of Fame lock, but his work ethic and competitive spirit and his mentality it's on a level with the greats like himself that I played with. Mark Messier, Yager, Ronnie Francis, Dave Andrechuk, all Hall of Famers. Henrik is right there, and that encompasses who and what he is.
Great story. One of the things I love about that story is your response to him kind of grabbing the brass ring and moving ahead of you. And I think it kind of colors, gives a good idea of the kind of person you are in your response to that. And I see how you are on the broadcast side of things. And I also know that there's always talk of you potentially jumping to a front office, and that balance has always interested me when it comes to you, because here you are, you've got the potential to go and jump right to the top of an office somewhere with the team, but you're also, your job is to inform people and to tell stories. So you've got access to all this knowledge that could help you get onto one side, and you're using it on the other side. And I wonder, I don't want to dig too deep. I'm not asking you to tell me some of the stuff.
Go ahead, please speak freely. It's cool.
Well, I guess I just want to get to understand from you the balance between having these conversations that you have of potentially being a guy running NHL teams, earning the trust of those teams, but also coming and serving your audience to make sure that you can take the information that you do know and help, illustrate the game to your audience. It seems to me like it would be a difficult balance to strike.
Okay, so great questions. Let me start by saying the biggest thing for me has always been to be true to the game, be true to the sport. That's the biggest thing. And to serve the game. I always say that, serve the game. Great Wayne Gretzky's always said, everything my family and I have in life, we owe to the great game of hockey. And if that's Gretz saying that, I think every single one of us, not without the last name Gretzky, should be saying the same thing and feeling the same sentiment. So that's the first thing, right? I never forget being that young kid going to Dominic's Variety Store or Greenside's Variety Store or Becker's or Max Milk and looking for the hockey card rack and looking for the latest hockey news and getting sticker books. And I'm the kind of person where when I played minor hockey, anybody will tell you, I've been a rink rat since I was 6 years old, literally. So that never changed. And even on nights when we weren't playing back home in minor hockey in Toronto, there are nights where we'd look in the Toronto Sun or Star, and I'd say to my dad, let's go to North Toronto Arena, man. Eric Lindros and so-and-so is playing, and Mike Torch is in that. I want to watch Mike Torch play. Like, that's the kid I was. And after games, and our home nights with the Toronto Red Wings were always Friday, right? So I never wanted to leave Chesswood early when I was young. That was our arena. I'd want to stay and watch. If I was playing Adam, let's watch minor Pee-wee, minor Bantam, midget. I want to see these goalies. That's me. So I've always been wired that way. And as that pertains to kind of where I am now, from a broadcast standpoint, I always want to be factual, informed, fair, and objective. Entertaining to some extent, but it always has to be rooted in those things. And I got to tell you guys, I'm very close, both of our families, Meg's side of the family and my side of the family, hardworking people, everyday people, and people. But we talk to our families all the time. And specifically when I call home after show, like last night driving home, my mom will always remind me, don't say anything stupid on TV. Don't go into foolish. Don't go and be disrespectful. So, you get that parenting, even at 46 years old. I get that parenting, right? And we have so much interaction with our families to where they keep it real and keep you on an even keel. So as a broadcaster, those are the things I strive to do. I've had some great people and have some great people that I work with on and off the camera here at NHL Network and during my time at Hockey Night in Canada and any other place that I've worked to this point. And I know that I'm not in the dressing room as a goalie anymore. So it's really important for me to get as much quality, trusted, factual information to share with the viewers and the listeners, right? That's really important. So there's that side of that. And then as far as the team aspiration or the senior executive type stuff, be it a team president or a team GM, there are a lot of or both. There are a lot of players that I played with and against that are in those roles, right? So be it Brendan Shanahan, I play with Shanny with the Rangers and the Devils. Kevin Adams in Buffalo now has come aboard. Ron Francis in Seattle. I can go up and down the list of people that I played with and or against in those roles now, let alone the people I played for. The great Lou Lamoriello, the great Glenn Sather, the late great Bill Torrey, the great Bobby Clark, just to name a few, and I've been able to learn a lot. And to me, guys, a lot of this comes down to one thing. And for a lot of the listeners that are out there and the viewers, it comes down to people. My parents told me that since I was young. We're in the people business, right? And a lot of it on the air, naturally, people get to see that more. But on a team aspiration or for some of those opportunities, it's even more critical. How you treat people, how you interact with people, everybody on the roster, from your equipment managers to your massage therapist to the people that are selling tickets and marketing, to every single player, to getting access to information from agents, from players, from overseas. One dial, Switzerland, one dial, Sweden, one dial, Finland, because you can't be every place at once. So a lot of your access to information really comes down to your relationships and how you treat people, and then how you can apply that to your hockey acumen, so to speak. So that's kind of how I approach it right now.
What's the biggest thing you learned from that process? I mean, not the interview itself, but going through that process of, going after a general manager's job, and how will that help you the next time you were involved in that kind of a search and apply for that job once again?
You know what, Ken? The biggest thing that I've learned is, again, it's all about people and it's all about the fit. That's the biggest thing that I've learned. Because I'll give you an example, right? When I first got traded to Carolina, and I walked in the dressing room with the Carolina Hurricanes with Paul Maurice as our head coach, I remember I wasn't a pink elephant anymore. And I don't mean this just based on where I am in the color wheel. I mean, as an athlete, I wasn't the only person that had an 8-pack at the time, for a stomach. I looked and I saw Brett Hedican, Sammy Kapanen, the great Rod Brindamore, the great Ronnie Francis, like the whole team. Everybody was stacked, like great shape, shredded, workout, post-game shakes, post-practice shakes, ice tub, cold tub, ice bath, hot tub, stretching. Like, it was a culture, right? And the reason why I say that is when I got traded there, everybody was like that. So once we started mowing down teams on our run to the Stanley Cup final against Detroit, externally, everybody's like, oh my God, Carolina, it's a non-traditional market. What do they know about hockey down there? We can't believe what this team's doing. They're the Cinderella team. That's all hogwash. It was all rooted in pumping iron, stretching, practicing hard, elite habits, and elite commitment. And the reason why I share that with you guys is that was me as a player, but I'm wired that way as a person. And from a team perspective in some of these team aspirations, because the margins in the NHL are razor thin, you need an ownership group that thinks that way and that's committed to that. And when you have an ownership group that's committed to that, that filters down. Because look, guys, the difference between winning a Stanley Cup and not literally can come down to your dressing room having something that the other dressing room doesn't have. And you're going to ask me, what does that mean? Maybe in your dressing room, in between periods, you have cold pressed juices and you have oxygenated water and you have activated charcoal drinks. And the reason why I tell you this is this happened with the Chicago Blackhawks en route to their last Stanley Cup that they won in 2015 against Tampa. Early in the playoffs, they were locked into that series against Anaheim, if you remember. And Anaheim almost had them on the ropes. And they had this overtime game. And I remember talking to my boy, Brad Richards. And Richie told me, him, Patrick Kane, Duncan Keith, and Jonathan Toews, your Winnipegger, Taser, all greats, by the way. Taser went, and they all went rather to the trainer, and they said, hey, get us some smoothies here in Anaheim. You see how we have this fridge in the dressing room, in the visitor's room? Get us some cold-pressed juices and smoothies. Fill it up. So imagine the trainer now has to go to Stan Bowman and get Stan's approval. Well, Stan might have had to go to Rocky Wirtz, and the owner, and get Rocky's approval. Never mind all that BS. When the boys showed up for the game, the fridge was stocked. Next thing you know, that game goes triple overtime. They win the game. And I remember talking to Richie on text. He's like, Weeksy, we felt freaking amazing. We've got him now. The series was 2-2, I think, at that point. He's like, we got him. They came back. They won the series. They went all the way. They beat Tampa, ironically for Richie, since he started his career with Tampa. And they went on to win the Stanley Cup. Like, that's how it goes. That's how things go. So those are the margins. And if you can have, again, an owner that's that committed to giving the resources to your team on and off the ice, your front office staff, your scouting staff, trainers, your players, your front office, you're cooking with gas. So that's what I really learned, is trying to find that alignment in somebody that you're really aligned with that way as an owner.
You know, Weeksy, I covered that Stanley Cup final. I got to say, I tried the cold pressed juices and they weren't working the same for me, but maybe it's the 10 beers I had before them that wasn't allowing it to work out.
I was going to say, you probably had something to counteract the cold pressed juices.
You mentioned Paul Maurice, that was an interesting point in his career. You guys go to the Stanley Cup final. I remember that was such an interesting run. That series against Montreal, where you guys turned the tables on them, absolutely phenomenal. I wanted to get your thought process on Paul Maurice, who we'll talk about. You know, he's got such a cross section across the league from all the time that he's been in, to kind of talk about how the game has changed and how he's had to evolve as a coach to keep up with the game and keep up with the new age player. It may be a big ask, because I don't know how often you talk with him or how much you can see into where he's at in his career now, but how do you think you've seen him evolve as a coach to stay in the league as long as he hasn't had the duration that he's had in Winnipeg?
Listen, I remember playing against Mo and Jimmy Rutherford's teams with the Detroit Junior Wings, now Plymouth Whalers in the OHL. And those teams were always stacked. And Mr. Carmonos owned them, by the way. And the same characteristics that you saw from their teams then in Indio, then I got a chance to play for them in the top prospects game. And then playing against them in the NHL. All the same characteristics are what I saw in junior. And one of the things about Mo, and a lot of people may or may not have forgotten the fact, he was an NHL head coach at 27 years old, man. This is the guy that earned his stripes, along with Jimmy Rutherford earning his stripes as well. But it goes back to riding the buses in junior. You know, they don't forget where they come from, specifically to Mo. Never forgot where he's come from. Always been open-minded, always been very worldly in his views. Never been one-dimensional or myopic in terms of how he sees people from different parts of the world. He's embraced players from different parts of the world, different cultures, different backgrounds. I can speak to that firsthand. Just he always gets a lot of the people part right, and that's really important. So when we say, well, we're looking for new age coaches that can relate to today's player, Mo's been doing that for years, and I really think that that's been a big part of his, not only evolution, but him being ahead of the curve that way, but then also being able to relate to the skill player as much as being able to appreciate Adam Lowry on that roster. And Adam Lowry, for example, the reason why I pick him, I played with his dad, Dave, with Pi. But Adam Lowry is a powerful, powerful young man, third line center, but he's still skilled, but he plays with jam. He's tough. He can punch your lights out. But Mo can still respect him as a player as much as he can respect Nikolai Ehlers. You see what I mean? Or as much as he can respect Mark Scheifele, for example, or Connor Hellebuck. And another thing with Mo is he's not a head games guy. You know, when you can treat people, which I was coming back to, when you can treat people properly, and when you can come to the rink, you're articulate, you're measured, you're balanced, and again, you know how to relate to the trainers. You can then relate to Ehlers, and you've been able to push Ehlers to become a shooter, which is awesome because we know he was always a disher and his speed is supersonic. But now he's shooting the puck with authority. Those are the little subtleties that Paul and Mo has always been able to exemplify with his teams. So I look at that and embracing the skill game. And I remember this, I'll take you back to the World Cup of Hockey up in Toronto, and I was doing that for ESPN, and I was in between the benches. And listen, Mo and Brad Shaw, I played with Shawzy, who's the assistant coach in St. Louis. We played together in the minors in Detroit in the old IHL. We played together in Tampa. And Shawzy and Mo were on, if you remember, they're on the coaching staff for Team Europe. You recall that. And Team Europe ended up going to the final against Team Canada, right? And Team Europe was coached by Ralph Kruger. And I remember talking to Mo after one of the pregame skates. He's like, Weeksy, Ralph's one of the most the organized men I've ever been around. Like, his attention to detail for every minute of this tournament is not, I've never seen anything like it before. This is Paul Maurice that had been in the league for all of these years, by the way. So his willingness to learn and continue his progression as a coach is really, really impressive. And his people skills are amazing. So those are the main things for me that I'd have to highlight where he's concerned for sure.
Some folks are unaware, Kevin, that you actually played with Wade Flaherty also in 2 stops, right? With the Islanders in Tampa. I mean, I got to cover him when he was in Milwaukee.
Yep.
And then also for a year with the Moose. I mean, what do you remember about him as a teammate, and what do you think of the job that he's done in working with Connor Hellebuck here?
Well, same thing with Flats. Like Flats, when we played together, being a young goalie that was on the come up and on the rise, and he was never weird. Like, there was never any jealousy. There was never any envy. Not the type of person that wanted to sewer you. He was never that. It was just always so clean and so honest and so supportive. And as a young guy, you don't always have that. You don't always have that. And I didn't always have that. There's other goalies that I played with at younger ages that, quite frankly, weren't really nice people and weren't really good people. And Flats was so awesome that way. And I can't tell you whether you play well or you don't, you have a good period or you don't, you're feeling good or you're not. When you have somebody that's there that has experience, that's played, but they have the wherewithal, and I like to say the human equity, to be able to, hey, young fella, great job here. Hey, buddy, keep an eye out for this guy. Turgeon likes to do this on the half wall. Or just keep an eye out for Brian Leach when he's coming in off that side of the point, blah, blah, blah. Like, those little things, that's invaluable. Because remember, here's something for the viewers too. So many of us grow up watching the game, and I told you how I would hyper consume the game. You don't know until you get inside the TV. You know what I mean? Like, we're watching this outside of the TV screen. But until you get in there, you don't know. You don't really know what it's like. You don't really have a firsthand experience. So he was so nice to me. I couldn't be any more grateful than I am to somebody like him. And in terms of what he's done with Connor Hellebuck, look, fellas, he's helped Helly become the second best goalie on the planet right now, arguably, and the reigning Vezina Trophy winner. Like, a lot of that goes to Connor Hellebuck, but a lot of that goes to Wade Flaherty. I'm telling you, like, I've seen in watching Hellebuck's game, there's so many little improvements in his game. Him being way more comfortable on his posts, him being way more comfortable with his size, knowing how to use his size to his advantage, how he holds his stick completely different, how he holds his hands the last 2 years, his hand positioning, both glove and blocker, completely different. His stance, not as wide, a little more narrow, so he has better balance. Like, all these subtle things that, most people couldn't pick up on, I've seen them. And more importantly, mentally being able to inspire and empower him too. Do you know what I'm saying? To be able to say, hey, Helly, you can be this. Hey, Helly, you know what Vasilevsky's doing down in Tampa, best goalie on the planet. You can be there. You can be there. Keep pushing. And Hellebuck won the Vezina last year. And if you're starting a franchise right now, and you're looking at goalies, everybody looks at Vasi and everybody looks at Hellebuck. And a lot of that credit goes to both of them, but Flats deserves a ton of credit for what he's done. I've been pumping him on the air. A lot of you back home, unless you have US Dish, you won't get the chance to see us. But I've been pumping Flats on the air. So when the world reopens and when we stop all the excessive, needless lockdowns that we have back up in Canada, because that's another conversation, Helly, maybe not Helly, well, Helly too, but Flats for sure owes me at least 6 steaks and 10 lobsters for sure. At least. For all the complimentary on-air mentions. But listen, it's richly deserved. All jokes aside, they've done an amazing job. They've done a great job as that duo. And Coach Maurice Paul's done a great job because there's no head games either. You know what I mean? He respects Brossois. He's told me how Brossois' work habits are and his conditioning and his practice habits and everything else, which you know. He's gotten him into games. He believes in him in that role. And at the same time, he doesn't play head games with Helly either. He knows what Helly is. He empowers him to be what he's become, and it's been great.
Kevin talked about Harn Ryan earlier and the hockey culture bringing him in. But one thing about that conversation we had with him is it's not a Shangri-La. It's not all perfection. And I mean, the Hockey Diversity Alliance is perfect proof of that. I wanted to bring up a situation, that was a very Winnipeg situation with Evander Kane. His time spent here, after he left, he made it clear that he felt he experienced racism here. Mm-hmm. Something stands out to me. There was one point where he had, carved into his hair, shaved into his head, was young money, cash money billionaires, which is a reference that is far too cool for me to understand, or I'm far too old. But it created news stories, and it was kind of like a big deal. And it seemed like I had a hard time understanding at the time why it was such a big deal. Something in baseball, I think, helped me understand this situation and may help me get a good question to you here. Mm-hmm. When Jose Bautista hit the big home run and did the bat flip, and it created such a big kerfuffle because, in baseball, you don't do that. You don't show up the pitcher. But what I learned from that situation is Latino players, they play with a lot of flair. Pitchers strike a guy out and they do a little shimmy and a shake. And, players, like, that's how they play. That's their culture. And that was, Latino baseball culture clashing with traditional staid baseball culture. And I wonder if, beyond that, you take a guy like PK Subban and definitely Evander Kane in town. I wonder if those are examples of Black culture clashing with traditional, staid, quiet, don't point attention to yourself hockey culture, or if I'm actually copping out by trying to boil it down to be that simple.
No, that's a fair question, actually, and I understand the merits of it too. And that's a good way to frame it. Objectively, the biggest thing that I can say, having lived, I'm 46, I've lived 21 years in the U.S., and that would be the other 25 back home in Canada. It's almost, it's a pretty close split. I'm soon to be a dual citizen. So let me just start by answering this by saying, number one, I'm a Bajan, Caribbean, Canadian American. Very fortunate for all three, Barbados, Canada, and the United States. Very fortunate, very lucky in three great countries in their own way. And each one of them has very unique characteristics that make them what they are. And I'm very grateful to all of them. My cultural home, ancestral, is Barbados, my roots. And then growing up in Canada, being raised in Canada, and hockey, and that being where my parents had the opportunity to build opportunities for us. And then me being in the US, obviously it's the epicenter in terms of opportunity in sports and entertainment and media in so many different sectors. So I'm grateful to all three. The one thing I will say objectively about back home in Canada that I think we do to our own detriment as Canadian people is this, that's too flashy. That's not me. It's small. We don't have to be that. We're not that. We really do a poor job of limiting what we are and who we are and what our acceptance level is. And I say that objectively because I was just having this conversation with my in-laws. There's so many talented, gifted people back in Canada in different roles. But because the mentality is, oh no, I can't do that. Oh no, that's too big. Oh no, I don't want anything flashy. Oh no, that's not me. We limit ourselves. And the hypocrisy of that is everybody wants to see Alan Jackson that likes country music. He's a star. You want to see him. Well, why do you want to see him if you're saying that that's too flashy? Everybody wants to see the Beyonce concert. Well, why do you want to see Beyonce if you're saying that she's too flashy? Everybody wanted to see the great Bobby Orr or the great Phil Esposito or Gretz or Mess or Sid or Connor, as you were talking about earlier, or up there in the peg, Mark Scheifele on a 2-on-1. And when you do watch them, it's like you govern who can be and who can't be. And then you say, oh my God, what a play. Did you see Connor? Did you see that amazing goal? Oh, well, it's Connor McDavid, so it's okay. Now, if that same goal was scored by Jason Robertson of Dallas, oh, well, I don't know. He's a California kid. He's a little flashy. He's an Asian kid. That is the ultimate hypocrisy. And I really think from our hockey standpoint, it's gotten way better. But we got to stop that foolishness, because what that does is it really limits our scope of who we are and what we are. And what we are as a sport is we're one of the best sports on planet Earth. That's what we are. And if you think of the moments, man, you think of Canada Cup 87 and Hamilton Cops Coliseum. I'm a 46-year-old man that played. I've been in the show for 20 whatever years between playing and broadcasting. I'm literally getting goosebumps talking about this. You see the quick up with Gretzky and Lemieux scoring that goal, winning 6-5. You didn't see those guys skate off like, all right, boys, great job. Great job. Well done. Well done, Brett. Well done, Muriel. Awesome play. You know what I mean? You saw that exuberance. You saw like the cameras. I wasn't even playing. I was a kid and I'm getting emotional. The cameras were shaking. Do you know what I mean? The cameras were going nuts. You think of the golden goal by Sid, 2010. The cameras in Van were going nuts. I had buddies on both teams, Team Canada and Team USA. The way they talk about that, I've spoken to Sid numerous times about that. Like all those iconic moments where you're big on the stage, but then there's this duality where you're like, oh, well, that's too much. So I just think that our sport and Canadians in general, we have a lot of greatness, man. And there's a lot of different flavors of greatness and the cultural acceptance of what's great. Like we watched Don Cherry for years. Okay. And I was sponsored by Don Cherry's team. Don Cherry sponsored our minor hockey team when I was a kid. And ironically, I ended up working on Hockey Night in Canada alongside, with Don and Ron. Don was the ultimate showman for years. Like for years. Then people would watch Deion Sanders and be like, oh, he's too flashy. Oh, LeBron's too flashy. Like, what are you talking about? Jose Bautista. So therein lies the hypocrisy. It's almost like we designate who can and who can't be, but we forget that inside of our own rinks, some of the greatest players in history and some of the greatest people that we have also been entertainers. And that's kind of where I think that our sport now, we need to continue expanding what that looks like and be up front and center. Here's one thing, guys. I've been to Italy numerous times. I got a lot of Italian friends. They never apologize for the pasta being too tasty. Like, what are you talking about? The pasta's too tasty, the lasagna's too good. Like you never ever hear that. So I think that's one of our things in hockey culture, and certainly as Canadian people, that I think we need to continue to do a better job at. But it's improving. It's getting better.
What's it going to take to get to that next level, Kevin? I mean, to sort of embrace more of that either NBA or NFL mentality where people aren't afraid to show their personality in terms of the players, where, cliches are not the accepted, we saw it here in Winnipeg in the last week. We saw Connor Hellebuck flat out say, I don't agree with being pulled. And you saw Mark Scheifele say, I didn't agree with the benching. I think that players should be applauded for that at times. We ask them to share their emotions. So when they do, I think it's often ridiculous that people react and say, oh, well, how can you say that that's an attack against authority? I mean, if you ask people to share their opinion, then don't rip them for being emotional.
100%. That's why I mentioned the word hypocrisy, right? Like, look, you turn on the TV over my shoulder. I've got our the NHL network's on right now, but you're watching Shark Tank. Do you see Kevin O'Leary on there being shucksy? He's not on there being shucksy. Well, I'm just here. I'm having a bag of ketchup chips, but it's nothing special. But it's just, there's none of that. I'm Mr. Wonderful. Mr. Wonderful's here. Here's my success. These are my failures. Here's what I've done in business. Here's what we're doing in business. That's why he's on there as Mr. Wonderful. And he's gone from Dragon's Den back home in CBC to an elevated stage to a global stage on CNBC on Dragon's Den, right? And that's kind of to your point, where some of these things might defy convention. And believe me, I love tradition. I'm old school in a lot of ways. I was raised old school in a lot of ways. I understand the people that have come before us and the fabric of them helping get things to where things are today. And some of those values are everlasting, let's be honest, right? But at the same time, there needs to be more openness and more acceptance. And in doing that, again, our sport will then go from, let's say you're the Winnipeg Jets, guys, okay, as an example. We don't want the Winnipeg Jets to just be relevant in Brandon, okay? You don't want them to just be, relevant in Swift Current and Rocky Mountain House and wherever else. You don't want that to just be the case. You want the Winnipeg Jets to be a global club. You understand what I mean? So when I'm walking around on Champs-Élysées in Paris or Le Marais in Paris, I want to see somebody wearing a Jets t-shirt. That's better for the Jets. That's better for True North. That's better for the NHL. It's better for the sport. And that's why I've been trying to implore. I was actually on the phone with Deputy Commissioner Daly yesterday morning. And that's a big part of what I've always wanted to see for our sport. People walk around, Man United till I die, Man United, Paris Saint-Germain, like soccer, Lakers, Yankees, anywhere in the world. And our sport is good enough. I believe in our sport, and our players are some of the best athletes in the world. I believe in our sport to where it's that great and our athletes are that great to where when we continue opening our perspective and not be so restrictive and holding on so tight in this tug of war all the time, but just say, hey, yeah, man, you're in France, you're in Monaco, you're a Jets fan, we love you. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you're in Nigeria, or your grandpa's in Nigeria, he loves the Jets. He's wearing a Jets jersey and a Line A jersey. A lot of you guys don't even know. I'm going to take this into my own house. 4 Christmases ago, my dad told me, he's like, I want a Patrick Line A jersey. I swear my life. I'm like, Dad, you don't know Patrick Line A. Why do you want a Patrick Line A jersey? He's like, well, my buddy Timo, who comes to Tim Hortons with us, Timo, he's my good friend, and he comes to Tim Hortons, and he's from Finland. And I love Finland, and I love Patrick Line. I'm like, you've never been to Finland. What are you talking about? I'm like, you've never been to Winnipeg. What are you talking about? But my man Paul Maurice is the coach, and you know I love Paul. He was great to you, and I love Patrick Line. See if you can make it. I swear to God, I'm now working the phone with the Jets to get a freaking autographed Patrick Line jersey for my Bajan dad, who's Bajan Canadian now, dual citizen, with a Patrick Line Winnipeg Jets jersey. So that morning, Christmas morning at my parents' house, there's this box. It's from my dad's opening it. He puts the jersey on, and he's wearing a Patrick Line jersey. That's in our own household. Do you get what I mean? But if my dad was closed-minded, that could never happen. Do you get what I'm saying? So I think
totally.
That's a big part of how our sport can transcend, how it can unify, and how sports are connective tissue. And especially a sport like ours, that's a family-based sport. None of us got here by ourselves. None of us, either of you on the mic or myself, we couldn't have gotten here without support of our family and loved ones and their commitment to us and investing in us and supporting us, right? And nurturing us. So that's what I want to see for our sport. That's how our sport becomes more international than what it's been. And that's one thing for Canada. I got to say this. A lot of times I hear us brand, we're like, Canada hockey's game. I'm like, again, Italians don't have to say that pasta and pizza are their food. They don't have to. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy it all. We want as many people to enjoy our sport as possible and to play it and to like it and to feel accepted as possible, Sean. So that's kind of my thing, especially as you're relating it to Hunter. And I could just say that from my own experience as a Black person too.
Kevin, you absolutely brought it today, my man. We are so happy to have had you. Our audience is so lucky to have been able to listen to your takes. I love your takes, but more than anything, I absolutely adore the passion that you tell your stories with. And we get to see it on the NHL network. And I'm just really glad to have been right sitting beside you doing this here today. Thank you so much for finding the time. We'd love to have you on again in the future if you could find the time again. But just want to say thank you and hope you enjoyed yourself.
Guys, thank you so much, both Sean and Kenny, man. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate your patience and me being able to schedule to get it in, especially with us losing our cat, Vlad, last week, if I'm not mistaken. We had to put him down.
2 weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times we're just we're looking around like, where is he? So it's been a trying year for everybody. You know, may he rest in peace. But it's been a trying year for everybody, and I always like to end on something positive and a little takeaway for the viewers and the fans. This is it's a really challenging time for everybody, and it doesn't matter whether you're white, First Nation, Indian, Asian, Caribbean. It doesn't really matter what your background is. This is a tough time for everybody around the world right now. And it's important that every one of you that's tuned in either now or that'll tune in later, stay positive, stay motivated, try to stay as healthy as you can, and continue believing in who you are and what you're aspiring to do. And, there's been a lot of adversity for all of us in different ways, right? Some people have lost loved ones. Some people have lost different family members or colleagues, or maybe opportunity, job, your hockey career is on pause for young girls and boys that are playing. You might have lost a family business, but just try to continue to stay as positive as you can. We have, especially back home, as I touched on, I want to end on this. There are a lot of excessive, needless measures that have been in place. I hope that everybody at home, again, one half of our family's from Western Canada, Meg's family's from Calgary in Alberta. So I'm not this East Coaster that's on here that you're going to say doesn't understand the West Coast. I understand it well. Spent a lot of time out there. So it's important for everybody to stay positive and stay unified. And we'll come through this together. And there's a lot of opportunities going forward for a lot of you. So, don't just look. I always say, don't be a fan of these two gentlemen that are on here, Sean and Kenny, only, and not be a fan of yourself and what your pursuits are. Continue to pursue your own opportunities for yourself and your career and things that you can accomplish. All things are possible.
Kevin, you're going to have to excuse me. I'm going to have to let you go because I'm about to run through that brick wall over there. Thank you so much, my friend. I cannot wait until the next time we get to sit down and chat with you. Thanks again,
boys. Blessings, man. Thanks,
Appreciate
everybody.
it. Have a great weekend.
You too. Take care, fellas.
That was amazing, Ken.
Tremendous.
Absolutely phenomenal. Great stories, great breakdowns. I love that there was the Paul Maurice insight, and it really shows you the connections, a hockey player. I took a look at him, and you go and you look at his stats, and you look at all the different teams he played for, and I think sometimes, Adam Lowry talked about it, the benefit of being able to be that guy who plays on that one team for his entire career and having that home that you carve out. But a guy like Weeksy, who kind of bounced around the league and went to a number of different teams, the different people that it brings you into contact with, the contacts that you make out of that, clearly that's serving him well. Clearly he understands the value in people. And boy, oh boy, is there any doubt in your mind that he's not going to end up in an NHL front office at some point after that conversation?
No doubt at all, unless he doesn't want to have an opportunity to do that, which we know that he does. I mean, if you're someone in charge of putting a team together and you don't think that he cares about team building, you need to open your ears. It's obviously clear that he loves the game, has passion for it, has been a student of the game for a long, long time. And because of his vast level of experiences and his willingness to accept roles, this is a guy who, he started 66 games in the NHL and then became a backup after having one of his best seasons and saw one of the greatest goalies of all time take the job from him. Of course, you're crushed when that happens, but guess what the attitude was? I'm going to be the best backup that I can be. Not, I want to be traded to the next team so I can be a starter again. Everyone wants to play as much as they can. I mean, I think Kevin shared some unreal perspectives there, and we were really fortunate that we were able to have him here and made it such a great show. And same with Gino to start it off too.
Yeah. Oh, great stuff from Gino as well. Great stuff from Kevin. I better do something with the rest of my day because there's a lot of energy I got flowing through me now after that. Hey, everyone who is out there watching, we appreciate you. One of the things that we love doing is when we have the guests on and they're giving us good stuff, the positive feedback. I know it means a lot to the guests, and we love to just kind of wallpaper all the positive comments that we're seeing here in front of them. It means a lot to the guests when we have them on. And it means a lot to us that you've tuned in for another episode of Kenny and Renny. Love having you along for the ride. And just a reminder, we'll be back tonight before the game against the Montreal Canadiens, 45 minutes before game time. Kenny and I will do a pregame breakdown on Instagram, and then afterwards, post-game show, same place you're watching here now, Kenny's Twitter account. I think we're going to switch to my Twitter account as well. Here's our warning: we're dropping Facebook because it just doesn't seem to be the place where these kind of things should live. And the best place to come check us out is on our YouTube channel. That's just search for Kenny and Renny YouTube. While you're there, click like and subscribe. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. I don't know how after that you couldn't, but Enjoy your day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.